Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For our talk today, please be reminded to use the chat pane should you have any questions to the speaker regarding her presentations. To enable you to do so, you have to first type your questions on the YouTube live chat. Then the moderator will read out the questions for you. Next, the link for you to fill your attendance will also be made available in the chat box. At the end of the session today, failure to do so will result in no attendance recorded. Above all, please remain calm as you are not alone. All other participants have already joined our talk, yet you won't be able to see each other. For your kind consideration and cooperation in ensuring the smooth flow of our talk today. Thank you very much in advance. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berusaha, Associate Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Samad Nawi, Rector of UiTM Cawangan Kelantan. Our distinguished guest, Associate Professor Dr. KHAISHAN Khong, our speaker for today. Yang berusaha, Associate Professor T.S. Dr. Haji Ghazali Osman, Deputy Rector of Academic Affairs. Yang berusaha, Associate Professor T.S. Dr. Khalid Abdul Walid, Deputy Rector of Student Affairs. Yang berusaha, Associate Professor Dr. Sherina Azlin Muhammad Nasir, Deputy Rector of Research, Industrial Linkage and Alumni. Yang berusaha, Dr. Muhammad Saiful Anwar Yusof, Head of Akademi Pengajian Bahasa, UiTM Cawangan Kelantan. Fellow colleagues and participants from Universitas Pembangunan Nasional Veteran Jakarta, Universitas Pembangunan Nasional Veteran Jawa Timur, Universitas Swadaya Gunung Jati, Universitas Al-Azhar Indonesia, Universitas Ahmad Dahlan, Universitas Muhammadiyah Sumatera Utara, Cagayan State University, and Haiphong University. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam UiTM di hatiku, salam dari tanah serendah sekebun bunga. Championing datapreneurship, empowering community. Welcome to International Lecture Series 1, Teaching for Intercultural Competence, What, Why, and How with Dr. KHAISHAN Khong. On behalf of the committee, I am Siti Shazlin Razak, and I would like to extend our warm welcome and heartfelt great appreciation to all honorable guests. Dearest ladies and gentlemen, to the program today. Ladies and gentlemen, let us start the program with the national anthem and wawasan setia warga UiTM. Ladies and gentlemen, for your information, today's talk is a collaboration between the Department of International Affairs and Akademi Pengajian Bahasa UiTM Cawangan Kelantan. This is our first initiative in organizing this series. It is hoped that it will open to more opportunities ahead. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to invite the Rector of University Technology Mara, UiTM Cawangan Kelantan, to deliver his welcome speech.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning. Our guest of honor, Assistant Professor Dr. Kashan Khong, Assistant Professor at University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, USA, Madam Lai Sime, Program Director and Liaison Officer of Department of International Affairs, UiTM Kelantan Branch, Top Management of UiTM Kelantan Branch, Head of Academic Center, Program Committee members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Alhamdulillah, thank you to the Almighty for the blessings that we are able to be here today in this event. It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome all of you to the program International Lecture, Teaching for Intercultural Competence, What, Why and How, with Dr. Kashan Khong. First and foremost, on behalf of University Technology Mara Kelantan Branch, I would like to extend my highest gratitude to none other than our distinguished guest speaker, Assistant Professor Dr. Kashan Khong, for her time and effort in having this session with us. We are indeed lucky to be chosen to host Assistant Professor Dr. Kashan Khong, who is an expert and has created notable impact in the field of intercultural communication. Respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, culture is an integral part of us as human beings, whereby it shapes us to be the person we are today. For better or for worse, we are sometimes defined by our culture. We would remember learning that what is acceptable in one's culture may not be welcome in a different society. There are many definitions of intercultural communication. Nevertheless, in essence, intercultural communication refers to interactions between different cultures. The globalization era, spurred by the advancement of the internet, has brought intercultural communication the forefront of everyday interactions. Those who are adept in the intercultural communication would definitely have the upper hand in today's world. It is a valuable knowledge and skills to possess, as it conveys sensitivity and alertness on behalf of the communicator. Learned participants, I am confident that this session with Associate Professor Dr. Kashan Khong is capable to shed more light on intercultural communication, particularly in the aspect of intercultural competence. I believe we would be more exposed to the importance of knowledge involving communication between cultures. Last but not least, with the support of our strategic partners from different countries, I hope this program would also strengthen the friendship and partnership that had been created. On behalf of UiTM Kelantan Branch, I hope everyone will benefit from this session today. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. for the welcome speech. Now, the time has come for me to hand over the rest of the talk to Ms. Shamimi Iliani. Signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shazlin. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. I am Shamimi and I'll be the moderator for today's International Lecture Series 1 on Intercultural Competence, What, Why and How. It is an honor to have Dr. Khong from the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. When I was informed that Dr. Khong was invited to give a speech today, I had a chance to read about her outstanding academic qualifications and achievements. So, to be fair to everyone, I'll share with you a brief introduction of Dr. Khong, and I'm sure you'll be in awe too. Dr. Kashan Khong received her first degree in English education from Zhangjiang Normal University, China in 2002. And 4 years later, she received a postgraduate degree of Master of Arts, majoring in Intercultural Communication from University of Sheffield. She then graduated from her PhD study in 2014 from the University of Minnesota and specializes in the second languages and cultures education. With her expertise and experience, Dr. Khong has taught at 6 universities in China and the USA, has presented and published more than 50 articles and book chapters, conducted more than 20 talks and workshops, received 16 awards and honors, secured more than 20 research grants, all of which were related to the topics about language, teaching and learning, culture and communication. Don't you all agree that it is an outstanding achievement that encourages us to pursue the same endeavor? Doctor, I'm sure that everyone in the hall is eager to listen to your sharing of today's topic. So without further ado, let's have Dr. Khong to share her insights into the teaching of intercultural competence. Should you have any questions, please type them in the chat box to be addressed at the end of the session. Doctor, the platform is all yours.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Ms. Shamimi, and also Ms. Lin for your generous introduction. And thank you so much for having me today. It's my honor to kick off the International Lecture Series. And if I could request my slides to be shown. Okay. Could you please move to the first slides, please? The very first one, the topic. Well, while we are waiting for the slides to be put up, maybe I can just begin by saying thank you. I understand that we have colleagues and world language educators or or educators from other disciplines from Asia and even outside Asia. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. That's great. Next slide, please. Again, as I mentioned, it's my great honor to be here to kick off the International Lecture Series, and more importantly, to share something I'm passionate about. And what I'm passionate about is intercultural competence. So good morning for these wonderful colleagues and educators from Asia and even outside Asia, because I understand that YouTube is giving a live show. So this may be my very first time and the only time in my life to be a YouTuber. So I'd better make the most out of it. So next page, please. Before I start my lecture, next one, yes. So before I start my lecture, I would like to give a big shout out, thank you to the UiTM Cawangan Kelantan campus. I want to thank Ms. May, Ms. Ling, Ms. Shamimi, and Professor Dr. Haji and your team for bringing me here today. I want to use the one of the few Malay words that I learned, terima kasih. Thank you so much. And it's truly my honor. The fact that you are able to put together this event in such a short time is already a great reflection of your commitment to intercultural communication and educational collaboration. So with that, thank you so much. Although I come from language and cultural background, I hope what I share today will be illuminating to you no matter what subject backgrounds you come from. Next, please. And as Ms. Shamimi introduced, I currently teach and work at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. I'm Associate Professor of Chinese. In the meanwhile, I also advise TEFL program. TEFL program is teaching English as a foreign language. As we all know, a large number of American students will want to teach English overseas when they graduate. So my job will be to advise these students what courses they need to take, what skill set they need to have. So I'm also doing that. I got to use the teaching English as a foreign language skill that I have. Thanks to Fulbright, I'm able to visit Malaysia. So right now I'm a visiting Fulbright scholar at Taylor's University. I teach a course, English composition for the American degree program. So with this housing in Taylor's, I'm so lucky to have a chance to present in different universities. So far, I've presented at UiTM Shahlan campus, and now I'm with the Cawangan Kelantan campus. Next, please. I teach in Wisconsin. I don't know how many of you have heard of Wisconsin or visited Wisconsin. If you haven't, I won't blame you because it's not like East Coast or West Coast and very popular tourist spots. Wisconsin is where the red dot is. It's Midwest in the US. Wisconsin is super famous for its dairy products. So if you like cheese or milk, Wisconsin is definitely the good place to go. Also, Wisconsin is famous for its natural scenery, a lot of national parks, water resources. It will be really beautiful if you visit Wisconsin, especially in the summer. It could be quite cold in the winter. And I also have a few snapshots of my university campus, Eau Claire. The left one, you see students graduating. We have a large number of international students, and actually many of them came from Malaysia too. And here was a campus student chilling. And the right side at the bottom is our mascot. And as you see the mascot colors, I hope you guys can see the colors, you're not colorblind. So what are the colors you see? We see blue and gold, not yellow, gold. So the mascot's name is super straightforward. The mascot's name is Blue Gold because of the two colors. So Blue Gold and I will welcome you to visit Eau Claire when you have a chance. And next, please. And Eau Claire, I don't know if you have heard of American universities, you may be aware of UW-Madison. Madison is actually one of the top public universities in the US. But actually, Madison is one of the 26 campuses under the University of Wisconsin system. And Eau Claire is maybe number 3 or 4 largest one. It's a beautiful liberal arts campus. Eau Claire, I just want to spend a minute to very quickly give you some brief introduction of Eau Claire. Eau Claire is routinely rated as one of the top regional public universities, and we offer more than 200 academic programs. Nearly 90% of the students participated in at least 2 high-impact experiences. And high-impact experiences refer to study abroad, community service, doing research with professor. All these experiences beyond the classroom that can create high impact on our students. If students study abroad, they may be worried about financial support. I don't know if they would, I would, but Eau Claire is always rated as one of the top public regional universities with its good quality education and affordability. Last but not least, Eau Claire is nationally well known for its undergraduate research collaboration support. So every semester, we highly encourage our undergrad students to do research with the professors. Not only do they get to learn how to do a research from scratch to writing literature review, data analysis, conclusion, not only do they have the whole package of training, they also will be compensated with some stipend. So right now, although I'm in Malaysia doing my Fulbright program, I'm also remotely mentoring 4 undergraduate students in the US doing research. And over the summer, when they spend time to do research, each person will get $1,500 as stipend. So I think it's a great opportunity for students. If you plan to do visiting scholarship overseas, or if you have your students who want to study abroad, I absolutely highly recommend that your students consider such opportunities, no matter which university they go to. So I just want to let you know, although Eau Claire may not be as famous or well known as Madison, it's truly a wonderful campus, and I welcome you to visit, whether for business or personal visit. Next, please. And today I'm here. I feel like I'm excited to be here to share with you about intercultural competence. My great passion about intercultural competence is greatly influenced by my own intercultural journey over the last 2 decades. Coming from a small town in southern part of China, I finished my undergrad, then I traveled to England to do my master's degree in Sheffield. And after moving to the United States, I finished my PhD and I got to work in Eau Claire now. I'm a tenured associate professor. And through Fulbright, it brings me full circle coming back to Asia. So I feel like all these 20 years of experience have helped me gain a lot of observations, and some experiences I think will shed light on intercultural competence. And so today I'm so happy to have this platform and share with you. Again, although my background is language and culture, I hope what I'm sharing will be applicable in your subjects. And I welcome your feedback at the end of my lecture to let me know whether it works or how you can adapt to fit in your subject area. Thank you. Next, please. So my topic is teaching for intercultural competence. I want to share what does that even mean, and why do we need to do that? Why do we need to promote IC, intercultural competence? How do we achieve the goals? So begin with, we talk about what. Next slide, please. So when talking about what, I would like to engage you a very quick, simple activity. Could you type in the chat, what is intercultural competence? I understand this is a loaded question, right? A lot we can say about IC, but in your mind, just on the top of your head, what do you think IC is? There is no right or wrong answer, of course, but just whatever you feel is helpful, just let me know what do you think IC is. So could you please type in the chat? So the chat, is it YouTube chat? I'm checking YouTube to see if I see any comments. Can you just type in YouTube chat and just let me know what you think in the cultural competencies? Do we have any answers coming? Does anyone see any answers from our chat? I haven't seen any. Oh, okay. I got one. Ability to function effectively across cultures, to think and act appropriately, to communicate and work from different cultural backgrounds. Thank you, Len. You already gave the wonderful definition. Understanding other cultures, ability to communicate, understand differences between people from different cultures, between different cultures. Okay. Any other answers that you think what intercultural competence could mean? Able to embrace other cultures, that's a wonderful word. Okay. Thank you. You can keep your answers coming. Although I may move on, you can keep your answers. Communicate and understand other cultures. Thank you so much for your engagement. Move on to the next slide, please. So in order for us to demonstrate and gain intercultural competence, inevitably, we will need to communicate. And many of you mentioned the word communication. Could you click one more time? So communication, what is communication? Communication is expression, interpretation, and negotiation of meaning in a given context. For some people who may not think about IC, intercultural competence, they may say, oh, communication easy. We just talk with each other. If you think communication is just talking with each other, you are addressing the expression, going out your message. But when you send out your message, it does not necessarily guarantee people understand it the way that you want. So because that's one way. Interpretation is input, thinking about how you interpret what other people tell you. When you communicate with people from different backgrounds, you may take their message in a different light. That's why intercultural conflicts may occur. So in my mind, I think the most important element in communication is the third one, negotiation. So negotiation really requires people to talk with each other and make meaning, understand meaning. So that's where that's the most exciting part, how we teachers can prepare our students to have the skills and curiosity and willingness to communicate and work with other people. So I find this definition very helpful for me, and it's very non-verbally expressive, like expression, interpretation, and negotiation. So just now I mentioned, because when we talk with people from other cultures, we need to negotiate meaning. And that leads to our next definition. Next slide, please. The next definition is intercultural communicative competence, or intercultural communication competence. It's a mouthful. It's not my intention to throw out all these mouthful phrases, or we can call it ICC. So what's the difference between ICC, intercultural communicative competence, and today's topic, intercultural competence? What is the difference? The difference is that intercultural competence is a broader framework. It lays the foundation of talking about intercultural competence in many areas. By adding the word communication, it's more related to language use. How do we, language and verbal and nonverbal too. So ICC refers to the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural situations based on one's intercultural knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So Deardorff, a very famous, well-known intercultural theorist, reminds us that in order to communicate effectively, we need to help students foster knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Us too, we educators live in the international world. How do we communicate with our colleagues across cultures with our important skills, knowledge, and attitudes? Next, please. So the next slide, I want to show you, I apologize, the picture may not be very clear, a bit blurry, but this picture really helps us understand the connections with all. So I see intercultural competence, like I mentioned, is about knowledge. Do you understand your own culture? Do you understand other cultures? Skills. Even if you understand, are you able to practice? Are you able to interpret the way that it should be interpreted to avoid intercultural conflicts? Are you able to discover new knowledge and interact with people? Are you able to mediate intercultural conflicts. You are a bridge. Are you able to perform as a bridge? Also, with a lot of knowledge and skills accumulation, are you able to develop your attitudes to be more curious, to be more open-minded towards others, rather than closing the door and keeping yourself to yourself, right? So, but all these 4 areas, knowledge, skills, and attitudes, but the main important thing is critical cultural awareness. This is not easily observable or measurable. Like, how are you able to learn so much? Then you look at your own culture in a critical lens, look at the good, look at the areas for improvement, with a final intention to make your own cultural community a better one. So that is the overarching base foundation of IC. Just now I mentioned ICC, we added communicative. That's to add a layer of language. When we, especially for language professors in the group, if you teach your students whatever language, Malay, Chinese, Japanese, are you just teaching the language per se? Are you using social linguistic lens to tell students you not only know how to say the word, you choose the word appropriately and culturally sensitively? So that's to embed the cultural ICC, the language side. And such cultural ICC can happen in so many places. If you look at the bottom, ICC could be fostered in the classroom between teachers and students. It could happen in field work. Sometimes teachers are there, sometimes only students. It could happen within students' independent learning, how students can foster their own thinking. So that is like the overarching foundation and framework. Next, please. And now at this point, I hope you have an idea about IC or ICC, and you already have knowledge to build on, some knowledge foundation to build on. I would just like to introduce that framework so you understand ICC is not that abstract. We have several areas, several domains: knowledge domain, skill domain, attitude domain, and critical cultural awareness domain. So for me, as a language and culture professor, it's quite natural for me to build in intercultural competence in my class. For educators from other subjects, computer, business, engineering, they may not see such a natural fit to bring in IC. So some people may argue, why do I have to do it? I'm teaching engineering. Why do I need to bring in the cultural competence? So next, I would like to share why it is so important. Next slide, please. So no matter what subject we teach our students, ICC or IC is a set of soft skills. It may not be easily observable as students solving a math problem or student building a computer code or computer program. It's not that observable easily, yet ICC or IC is a set of soft skills to make our students become better person in general. So firstly, our students will be more respectful to other people. They can be more open to other people's viewpoints. Students can be more empathetic and develop compassion. When they understand people come from a different background, they are more willing to help when they have more empathy. Students will be more open-minded and accepting to people from different cultures. They will be less judgmental. Last but not least, I think students will really be able to break stereotypes. I feel very fortunate to be in Malaysia. Malaysia is such a wonderful setting, unique setting, internationally well known for its multiculturalism and multilingualism. So I feel that you guys are in such a useful, such a great, wonderful, incredible, exceptional environment. If our students are able to demonstrate and develop their intercultural competence, they are already able to bring people from different ethnicity, religions, and regions in Malaysia. You already do a great job building your community, and then you can extend beyond to build bridges between Malaysia and other countries. Among the 4, I find breaking the stereotypes most important. Next slide, please. And because Malaysian people growing up seeing different ethnicity, and you may be more familiar with other ethnicity, but not necessarily people outside. Or maybe your Malaysian students may not be so familiar with the regional differences in other countries too. When we do not understand people by individuals, we may have overgeneralization. we may think, oh, a group of people are always like that. Or this generalization may not be ethnicity-based, could be gender-based, could be age-based, could be profession-based. So stereotype always offers a polarizing effect. Normally, stereotypes will assign positive attributes to the in-group, but negative attributes to the out-group. And stereotypes may be subtle, yet it can be harmful. So if we can embed intercultural competence in our teaching, we can help students avoid that and mitigate and even dismantle stereotypes. Next, please. So here I gave two brief examples. This picture I chose was from an art project from Yang Liu. This artist was residing in Germany many years ago. And this artist, with a good intention, the artist wanted to create some cultural comparison for people to see what culture is like. So the artist used the blue color to represent German culture and the red color to represent Chinese culture. So this one is in terms of complexity of self-expression. The artist feels that in Germany, people express themselves straightforward, just like a doodle and a line. While in China, Chinese people always beat around the bush to express themselves. So the self-expression seems taking a lot of detours. So the good thing, the value of this art project is for people who have no knowledge about China, they may get some sense. Yet this project proposes a risk that people could have a stereotype, thinking all Chinese people would take forever to express their ideas. So we as educators, I think what we can compensate is to help students understand, although there is value in this kind of comparison, we also want students to understand, don't project every Chinese person like that. Don't predict every Chinese person like that. Next slide, please. Coming from the same project, on the blue side, the German project, the artist feels that at a party, German people like to gather 2 or 3, have a small talk and chit-chatting. And the artist feels in Chinese parties, we always sit in a circle and do this collective sharing. Again, this could happen, but really depends on the context, depends on the gathering. So if without specific description of the context, it could risk a stereotype. Next, please. You can continue clicking. Thank you. So some of the characteristics of stereotype would be passing judgment, leave little to no room for exceptions. Next. It can create categories that often dominate all other features, because in stereotype, you only see one person on that negative attribute. You will let that specific negative attribute dominate all other features, not allowing other characteristics to be seen or appreciated. Next, please. And do not tend to change. Even if sometimes people know that stereotype is not representing all people, because that stereotype has such a deep-rooted feeling, it's not easy to change. Even if you are proven wrong, people do not change. Next, please. Stereotypes also are not formed by scientific empirical evidence, but also begin and formed by anecdotes. So when anecdotes could be my auntie came from whatever country and told me this. So I formed these stereotypes. So as educators, we can help students diversify stereotypes, like anecdotes only represent 1 or 2 incidents, but not the entire picture. Next, please. And stereotypes, of course, do not help people understand their differences. Next, please. So luckily, there is a lot of research and a lot of strategies suggested by people how to help students reduce their stereotypical thinking, including you need to have the recognition of your own stereotypes. You need to have the awareness. Remember ICC, the central core project, the central core element is critical cultural awareness. Critical awareness comes from your self-reflection. If we can create activities for students to reflect on themselves, to be candid in sharing their own biases and stereotypes, it will be helpful for students to see the harm and they are more willing to try. and educate yourself. When you think of a stereotype, you try to think of someone's overall characteristics rather than the only one. And you change your perspective, like number 6, when you start to make stereotypical comments on other people or other groups of people, think about how other people may have made comments on your group. So how would you feel? Like when I'm teaching in the US, I welcome students to tell me what stereotypes they may have about Asian or Chinese people. I will not blame them, of course, because that's why we are here. We are learning. But I will ask students to try to put themselves in others' shoes, to think about perspective thinking. I also share with students what are some of the commonly misconceived stereotypes people have about America. And when they feel that some people would take it personally and say, no, that's not true. We Americans are not like that. So that was a very good teachable moment for you to see perspective taking is so important, and so you can develop your empathy. And next, please. So what we can do as teachers is to, no matter what subjects you teach, if you are able to bring in the cultural competence, talk about other cultures, how they may act differently, how what you see could be different from what they mean. That's like sharing with students the iceberg. I'm sure many of you have seen the culture iceberg. What is observable above the water and what is not observable below the water. Can you click, please? You can click 2 more times. So yeah, basically we just want students to develop the mindset. It's help students develop this second nature. When you interact with people from other cultures, do not just use the small piece above the water to judge the whole person below the water. It's difficult because the deeper the element it is, the harder to identify. Same thing. When we think about how we can adapt to other cultures, no matter whether our students go to business sectors or go to computer science or Silicon Valley or IT, because how you approach something, your problem solving skills sometimes can reflect how you approach things in general in your culture, influenced by your culture. It's difficult to change, especially if the values and approach are beneath the water. So for us, not only do we want to not judge other people, we also want to be proactive to think about how we can understand our beneath water and adapt our values. Next, please. Also, when international intercultural conflicts occur, we want our students, communication breakdown, communication barriers occur in all fields of life, all walks of life, all fields. But when such issues occur, how are we going to help students shift the cultural perspectives? Can you click 3 more times, please? So from Anais Ning said, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. That's why sometimes in the cultural conflict occurs, because we judge people from the cultural glasses we're wearing. So if we see intercultural conflicts occur, are you able to take off your own sunglasses and put on other people's sunglasses? Next, please. And one more. So cultural conflict, cultural communication is more about making meaning. And this is applicable in all subjects, not just Chinese language teaching. And we also want to recognize our own lenses and put on other people's lenses. And what we need to think about, my educator friends here from different disciplines, what we need to think about is what is the cultural lenses you want to introduce to your students? So for instance, if you're teaching business, you want to someday in the future, your students may launch a business in other cultures. How are your students going to put on cultural lenses from that target culture and launch a business proposal that fits the cultural context? I can give you a brief example. KFC in China. So KFC in China is developing better than McDonald's. From my friend's perspective, my friend owns 2 KFC in China, and he has been my guest speaker sharing some so-called success, secrets to success. He was saying that KFC does a really good job localizing its menu to fit Chinese culture. While McDonald's, sometimes they make some adaptations, the menu update frequency in KFC is way faster than McDonald's. And so KFC during Chinese holidays, KFC will have a special menu proposing Chinese cultural fusion. So people get to experience Western culture, but also keep the original characteristics of Chinese cuisine. So they are able to shift the lenses and build intercultural competence together. So I think no matter what subjects our students are going to endeavor into, these intercultural lenses will be important. Next, please. So for us to foster our students in the cultural competence, why is it important? It is important because if students have high intercultural competence, they are more willing to engage in intercultural dialogues. They will be more willing to expand worldview. They have the capacity to do so. They are more willing, they're more interested in intercultural learning and develop lifelong inquiry. They also are more willing to get out of the fishbowl, like a fish get out of the fishbowl, to fit in different water bodies. They can enhance competitiveness. Imagine employer has two students who have similar skill sets, but this person has demonstrated intercultural sensitivity. As an employer, I may be more willing to hire that student because it can help me expand my international market. And also it can promote students' academic and professional growth. Imagine if your students plan to study abroad for exchange programs or PhD or master, if they in Malaysia, in this wonderful environment, they already foster IC, when they go abroad, they have an easy landing. It will be ease into other cultures, and that consequently will benefit their academic study. Next, please. So in summary, I find intercultural competence important because our goal is to develop our students into academically interculturally competent, socially, emotionally competent in the cultural setting, so they understand all these feelings, the roller coaster feelings when they are abroad. It's natural when they communicate with people from other cultures. Sometimes you feel frustrated, sometimes you feel excited, anxious, homesick, honeymoon stage. All these are necessary for students to understand. Also, we want to prepare our students to be interculturally competent in professional career development. Last but not least, of course, it's important for them to be culturally competent. Next, please. So it gets to how. I've talked for this 20, 30 minutes, and you may say, well, it makes sense. Yeah, it is important, but how do I do it? I teach other subjects like how do I teach intercultural competence if it involves attitudes? How do I evaluate and find out if my students are interculturally competent? So I want to give you some examples or some suggestions and see if if these suggestions are applicable for your subject. Next slide, please. So I think in order to teach intercultural competence, it's not just one or two isolated activities. Embedding cultures in your language or subject teaching involves the entire teaching process, from curriculum design to teaching to assessment. So to begin with the curriculum design, because my favorite mantra is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So I always use this mantra to tell myself, if I just randomly or spontaneously integrate an activity in my teaching, it could be fun, but may not reach the goal. And what is my goal? So I think to begin with, our curriculum design will be so important. And I understand every subject, every discipline we teach, we have our own standards to meet. So what I suggest for you, if you're not in the language and culture field, if you teach other subjects, what I suggest is to put in even one small piece in your curriculum design. It's totally doable to integrate disciplinary standards and intercultural competence goals. For instance, you can bring in just one piece and say, okay, this semester, every unit, I share one cultural fact from other culture for my students to analyze. So business, every unit, I bring in one different cultural case study for my students. So you intentionally embed intercultural competence into your business curriculum. So you do not need to make huge every single lesson you do something, but bring in a standard to inform your teaching. So this curriculum always reminds you, okay, maybe I can embed this one. And for example, so also embedding in the cultural competence in your standards will really help you expand your learning outcomes. For instance, in the language teaching field, I train many teachers in the United States. We see the difference between language-oriented design and in the cultural competence-oriented design. You will see the difference. Language-oriented design, we see teachers' outcomes or teaching goals. They will say, by the end of the class, students will be able to use past tense to describe a story, narrate a story. That's very language-oriented because your goal is for students to master the past tense, the verb tense. On the other hand, if you are in the cultural competence-oriented design, you may say by the end of the class, students will be able to relate their self-stories with someone from the other culture and they interpret the similarities and differences by using past tense. So if you write your teaching goal like that, it shifts your attention from past tense as the more dominant element to relate their personal story with a story from other cultures by using past tense. Then the language standard has become secondary because your most important thing is relatability between cultures. So that's for language and culture teaching, for marketing as well. So if you can talk about business marketing, how the marketing can embed with local cultural sensitivity. So that would be a good example for you. Engineering, for example, you may think about creating culturally appropriate engineering projects to benefit communities in other cultures. So if you're building a water system for an underdeveloped region in other countries, how do you build this water system by valuing, by embracing their values? They may have the ancestry significance of the land. They may have different taboos. How are you going to build that with your skill and in the cultural sensitivity? So I think curriculum design is very important. Next one, please. But I think many teachers, including myself, may be so excited by the teaching part because the teaching in class on the spot interaction is super important because students get all these activities, interaction, and momentum going on. Next, please. Like I mentioned, I train many American teachers in America, and many teachers share with me the challenges they have in embedding in the cultural competence in teaching. And I gather and divided the challenges into 4 areas. The 4 areas will be how do I present knowledge to show intercultural competence? How do I engage students? How do I expand students' learning? And how do I facilitate discussion? Facilitating discussion, especially in IC, in the cultural competence, is so important because when we talk about culture, it inevitably relates to religion, politics, personal values. And sometimes it requires a lot of negotiation, healthy, constructive, non-judgmental discussion. And when the atmosphere is getting heated, the teacher will play such an important role to facilitate. Next, please. So the first one is how do I present knowledge by showing in the cultural competence? One of the very simple thing to do, and I think all teachers in different disciplines could do, is to embed the cultural 3P in your discipline education. Culture 3P is a concept given by ACFO. You see the small font at the bottom, American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. ACFO is the biggest language educators platform and organization in the United States. Although the concept may be more applicable in language teaching, I personally feel it's totally doable no matter what subjects you teach. So this one, the concept is to help teachers understand culture is not that abstract. You can approach culture from a simple artifact. So for instance, if I teach business or business communication, I may use a business card, something small, a business card, but nowadays people use a lot of digital business card. No matter whether it's digital copy or hard copy, it doesn't matter. Use the business card as a product. So the first P is products. You want to talk about how people in different cultures use the business card or write on the business card. So that's the practices, what people do with the business card and why do they do it this way. So for instance, some people in China, the business cards, again, I don't want to stereotype, it's not all China. Some people share with me in their companies, everyone entry level will be project manager. So even if you're entry level coordinator, your business card may say you are project manager. Because when you present to other clients, your clients will feel your position is good enough for them to show respect. Sometimes client will say, come on, I'm an owner of the company. Why do you send an entry-level coordinator to talk with me? It's to show respect to your clients. They may elevate the title a little bit. That's what they do with the business card, right? Secondly, in many Asian countries, including Malaysia, the way you present your business card may be in a very respectful way. You may use right hand and both hands. In China, we use both hands to exchange business cards. In the US, this practice is not that important and they just randomly, casually show you their business card. So each country, how they present the business card shows you the practices, but why? So the perspective is the underneath the water. You can tell people, you can have your students explore the reasons, like in China or Asian countries, why they present business cards both hands to show respect. Maybe the way they show respect is different from the way respect is reflected in the US. That's the exciting part for students to see. That's so interesting. Such a small thing. A business card can be so different. Like in other subjects, you can find different things. Like you can find a manual, how people in different countries design a manual, how people in different countries use computer differently. Maybe the timeline they use computer or the habits they use computer maybe differently. But I think that's how you can present knowledge. Simple, small thing, business card, find a product, help your students understand, help your students make connections with other cultures. A second one is connect with the community. So thanks to technology, we are able to communicate on virtual platform. So if you have your students in your subject, whatever discipline, communicate and connect your students with people in this field, not just within Malaysia, but outside Malaysia. I'm not saying that totally ignore within Malaysia. Absolutely, you need to value your own community, but also outside Malaysia, so students have the comparison point. So I think it's not that difficult. You just need to think about just a little bit thinking, and you can really make a huge impact on your students. Next, please. The second one is how to engage your students. Some professors may say, my students don't seem so interested. I think we can target our activities or relate our activities, connecting with students' academic major, career plan, and profession or personal hobbies. So it will be very difficult for you to differentiate each student's need. So maybe you can group students. Okay, these 5 students have this similar career plan. These 5 students have similar personal hobbies. So have them do group work. Have them choose a topic in the field, in the academic field. Give them some prompts to relate to other cultures too. So in this way, they get self-motivated because they are working on something they're passionate about. Another thing is artifact exploration. Artifact exploration is similar to the culture 3P I just mentioned. But for this one, the difference is that you don't tell students what the artifact, what the business card is. You don't tell students. Maybe you give them a random artifact. Have students do research and share with you all the nuances. So this one, again, you activate your students' agency to research. Story circles is always useful because no matter what subject you teach, there must be some stories behind that. Like, why do people get into engineering? Why do people get into politics? So have students sit in a circle. It can be 10 minutes in the last lesson. So have students sit in a circle and share their stories with each other. Sharing stories, story circle, this activity is super helpful for intercultural competence because it trains students to be an empathetic listener. Because Because when other people are telling stories, you have to listen. You cannot always say, yeah, you cannot jump onto the story and say, yeah, I feel the same. I da 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 da, I da 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 da. As teachers, it's helpful for you to tell students this 5 minutes belongs to your listener, belongs to your storyteller. You cannot begin any sentence with I. You cannot shift the attention to yourself. You have to pay full attention to this person. So it's like in the cultural communication, what we are lacking that causes so much misunderstanding is lacking listening. Because when people start talking about something, you think about I, da, 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 da. So it's helpful for students to practice the skill to be a listener and focus on you rather than I. And collective inquiry is like having students do group projects. What would be really fun is a global classroom. Have your students do projects cross-culturally, cross-geographically with people from another nation and culture. They can collectively inquire and research something. During this collaboration process, students are learning and gaining and adapting their intercultural competence. So if your university has such affordability or such affordances, opportunities, I will encourage you to do global classroom projects. I've been doing this from small scale, and the result is very pleasant, and students are very happy and welcoming such an approach. Next, please. And next one, expand learning. One of the best ways for you to expand your subject is to connect with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 SDG here for you to choose from. No matter whether you teach history, math, business, computer science, they all relate to education, gender equity, poverty, water, sustainability. What else do I have? Climate change, life below water, everything. Pick one or two goals. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't feel that I have to relate to everything. Pick one or two goals every semester and make an intentional connection with your subject. So for instance, myself, this coming fall semester, my focus will be community engagement. So I'm working with a professor out in Malaysia. So we are going to collaborate to help American students and Malaysia students to understand each other's folktale stories and understand each other's values. So this is one way for us to talk about this education, like quality education, for instance, number 4. So how do they talk about education shapes their cultural identity? So I highly encourage, if you're not so familiar with SDG, United Nations SDG, I highly encourage you too. But actually, from my understanding and observation, in Malaysia, so many universities are doing great things relating to the US SDG. So I'm pretty sure your university has similar initiatives. So instead of doing two different things, I encourage you to combine your university's community engagement initiative with your teaching. So you can kill two birds with one stone. Okay, next one. Last but not least, like I mentioned, sometimes when you talk about intercultural conflicts, you want students to discuss. Sometimes students get worked up, they get excited and angry or enthusiastic. So that's most important for you as a teacher, educator to facilitate. Here are 10 tips for you to help students form the ground rule, know your own bias. When we know our own bias, we ourselves can get calm. Like, to tell you the truth, as someone originally from China, teaching in the US context, sometimes if we talk about cultural politics, of course there are moments that were stressful for me, because growing up in China, receiving education in China, I form my own set of values and view of the world. When American students challenge that, sometimes I will feel offended, I will feel personal. But it's important that I know I have this feeling, then I can prepare myself to be calm and construct a healthy conversation. In most of the cases, American students are fine when you share with them where you came from, how you feel, why you have these views, rather than attacking them for attacking people. So it's important for teachers to tell students it's important to focus on the issue, but not the person. And there are 4 areas for teachers to facilitate and build a constructive and healthy environment, class environment. Slogans, posters you around, you decorate your classroom can show your positionality. If you show that healthy community building, respect, I think your students understand where you come from and your expectations. Secondly, teacher modeling. You yourself model how you describe something or someone, how you do it in a non-biased and balanced way would be such a great example for your students. Language support. If you have international students in your classroom or students who tend to use different communication styles or do not choose the accurate word to describe their feeling, it would be important for teachers to give the support, scaffolding. We are helping our students to use the language, choose correct language to express the meaning. Remember, expression, interpretation, and negotiation. Helping students better, more accurately describe their meaning would reduce a lot of misunderstanding. Last but not least, activities will be so helpful. You can building activities in your class so students understand the purpose of this activity is to build a constructive learning environment. Next, please. So you may say, okay, now you share some tips, but again, attitudes, openness, curiosity. How do I know if my students have achieved these goals, right? As a teacher, we always want students to show evidence, results, outcomes. How do I assess? Again, Dierdorf reminds us all that given the complex, lifelong, and holistic nature of intercultural competence, there is no one tool that can measure all this construct in its entirety. Rather, research has shown that there needs to be a multi-measure, multi-perspective approach employed in assessing the cultural competence in others. So if you remember, just now I show you the framework. We have knowledge, skills, attitudes, critical cultural awareness. So the knowledge and skills are relatively easier to assess. For instance, you give students multiple choice questions, ask students about cultural practice in a certain country or business etiquettes in a certain culture. Have students choose multiple choice or true or false questions. If they get the answer right, that means they learned the knowledge. If they get the answer wrong, they haven't learned the knowledge. So knowledge is relatively easier to assess. Skills, we can give students role play, spontaneous response, writing an essay, giving them scenarios to perform. Like for business, you can have them pretend that they are meeting, or you bring in international business people to your class, have them interact. If students are able to interact correctly, appropriately, then students have mastered the skills. But for attitude and critical awareness, we really need an array, a variety of activities to assess. Next, please. So here I want to suggest a list of commonly used activities for you to assess students. Fantini and Dierdorf both gave a list of activities for you to choose from. So this is like a toolbox. I'm trying to share these tools with you. I hope that you will put these tools in your toolbox. Based on your context, you pick and choose what activities will combine good combination for you to assess your students. So many of these activities may sound like they are focused on language teaching, but absolutely you can use these activities for other subjects. For instance, case study. Case study does not necessarily limit to language teaching. You can do case study in science, computer science, or mathematics, or accounting. But then you use this case study to measure students' understanding, whether it's from an ethno-relative lens or from ethnocentric lens. So for instance, very simple, if students say, oh my God, this case study, of course they are so stupid, the characteristics, they're so stupid. Why don't they do things in a Malaysian way? So if students make comments like that, it's very likely that students are still relatively limited. They're not open to explore other possibilities. So this shows you a piece information of their mentality and attitudes. Also, you can analyze narrative diaries. if you give your students a narrative diary of a business expat in I don't know, Australia, a Malaysian in Australia, or Australian person, businessman in Malaysia, you analyze the diaries and have students tell you what they see. If students are able to bring out the cultural points below the water iceberg, that means students understand better. Rather, if students only focus on observable facts, then maybe your students' intercultural sensitivity or intercultural competence level is developing, not there yet. Next page, please. If you truly want to put a number or really want to measure how well your students' intercultural competences, there are also many choices in the field. Some are paid, some are free tools for you to use. For instance, this one, the second one on the top line, the right one on the top, in the Cultural Development Inventory called IDI. IDI, I'm quite familiar with that because I'm a certified IDI assessor and interpreter. So IDI is one of the most well-known intercultural competence tools in the field. It's been several decades internationally popular. This one is a 50-item survey for your students to finish. And when students finish, there are 6 stages in IDI. You have denial. Denial means students totally do not see any cultural differences. Defense means students see the differences, but they still think they are the best. Their own culture is the best. They defend. Number 3 is minimization. Minimization means students see the differences, but they often see that they always say, well, at the end of the day, we are the same people. So they minimize the differences. Number 4 is acceptance, meaning you accept the differences, but you are not very good. You don't want to, or you are not very good at adapting. Next one is adaptation, means you not only accept, you are able to adapt, but maybe not very deep yet. Maybe it takes you time and efforts. Last but not least is integration, meaning students are more easily adapting to different cultures. So if you have the financial support, you have students take this IDI, you're going to see where your student stands. It's a general assessment. Of course, every person, based on specific topic, our views may be different. But this one gives you a better sense. Again, many universities, they want to give a record of students in the cultural development. They give students a chance to do pre and post. So maybe students enter university in first year, and then they do a post IDI assessment by the end of third year or fourth year. So your university can collect data to show whether your intercultural competence education is effective, to see if students' level has improved. So I'm more familiar with this one, but there are many, many tools. Some are paid, some are free. My whole message is for you to understand it's not easy, but it's absolutely doable for you to measure your students if you are willing to use a combination of measurement skills. Next, please. So besides teaching in everyday classroom teaching, what other activities we can do to improve our students in the cultural competence? Beside the classroom, beyond the classroom walls, we can also engage our students in other high-impact learning, including study abroad, community service, or directed research. Doing research with professors also is a great skill for students to practice, especially if your students or faculty came from different backgrounds. This collaboration process is a great learning opportunity for them. Next, please. So I have shared a lot about teaching, what we do. So when I'm reflecting on our role as educators and teachers, what role are we playing in helping students? I feel like we are bridge builders. We are bridge builders to connect many aspects together. Next, please. So what are we connecting? I feel like we educators are privileged to be in this position. We are able to connect our students within Malaysia and beyond Malaysia. Like I mentioned, I'm fortunate to be in Malaysia, such a unique setting, and you should take advantage of these great resources of culture and language and ethnicity to connect your students within the community and beyond the community. Clockwise, next one, I think we are so lucky to be in a position to bridge students between academic learning and community. And I know at Taylor's University and maybe many other universities, students have so many opportunities to apply the knowledge in communities. And that's because of the efforts by the educators like you and me. Next, I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself. Next, next one, the bridge builder is building students individually and the world. Just like we are during this teaching process, we are connecting ourselves with the world too. Also, we are building the connection between language and culture or subjects, any subjects and culture. Next, please. So, in conclusion, how do we foster intercultural competence? I feel like the message I always get and I want to remind everyone is that it's not an overnight happening. So if you feel overwhelmed, you feel a little bit stressed, totally understandable. But we want to understand that intercultural competence development is a journey. It goes ups and downs. It's like roller coasters. Sometimes you see endless roads. Sometimes you get excited. Sometimes you feel frustrated. You feel disoriented. All of these feelings are valid. But what's most important thing is our commitment to do that for ourselves and for our students. Next one. I want to end my presentation with this famous Chinese saying from Lao Tzu, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So although the journey is long, we can only do what within our control, right? So as professors, as teachers, I think we are so lucky to have the opportunity to make an impact on our students and the community. It's important we take that single step. Take it easy, but take a step. Don't stop right there. So on that note, next please. Here are some references, literature I have used for this presentation. If you are interested, check out this great work by these scholars. Next. Okay, on that note, I just want to say thank you again, Terima kasih, for having me present at this international lecture series. I welcome your feedback and questions, and you can share with me what you do. I'm sure you guys are doing great things too. Share with me what you do to foster your students in the cultural competence, and I want to gather your experiences and skills and take back to the US and share with my colleagues. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Doctor, for taking us on a wondrous journey into the world of teaching for intercultural competence. All in all, I can summarize that intercultural competence begins within an individual, begins within ourselves before we can spread the same awareness to others. And considering today's complexity of intercultural backgrounds, it is important that us develop higher sensitivity towards others. We have, now we will get to the questions from the audience, and from the chat box, I can see that there are a few questions from our participants. The first one is, one moment, okay, here from Miss Chin. In addition to integrating intercultural competence into a current curriculum, can IC become an independent syllabus in a curriculum in a language program? Why or why not?
You mean in addition to adding in the cultural competence in curriculum, we can also set an independent curriculum focused on intercultural competence?
Yes, that's the question. If IC can become an independent syllabus on its own.
Absolutely. Very good question. Thank you. So actually, IC began as its own individual field. Like, so in classes, in schools, you see a lot of courses called intercultural competence, intercultural communication. We see that. But that's a very good point to begin with. Yet, when we train teachers, we want teachers to understand because we always talk about multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary learning, we see more and more important why teachers in intercultural competence should not be just one subject, should be interweaved in other subjects. That's why the initiative now is to train our teachers to embed intercultural competence in other subjects. But absolutely, intercultural competence, if you want to go depth, you absolutely can have it as your own syllabus. I teach a course now called Intercultural Competence and Language Use. So that one is not tied to Chinese language or second language teaching. It's more about intercultural communication and how it's reflected in different cultures through languages too.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. There is also another question asking for the differences between ICC, intercultural competence, and cross-cultural competence.
Okay. I've been asked this question before. It's such a great question. I think, just my understanding by reading literature, I feel like cross-cultural communication is more about, I could be wrong, but my understanding is that cross-cultural competence, there are a lot of similarities between cross-cultural communication or competence with ICC. But what I see in the inter represents the interaction. Cross, you could be just adapting really well, but you may not be able to involve a lot of interaction with people. Also, that's one difference I see. The second difference I see is that intercultural competence really focuses on the critical cultural awareness, the inner voice. Because for intercultural competence, we say that we want to know ourselves better by looking outside. So at the end of the day, you come back to your inner voice to see how you become a more competent person internally. Yet cross-cultural communication, we see a lot of similarity, but may not focus so much on this critical cultural awareness, that piece.
That's one more question, Doctor. How to develop ICC as a teacher?
So ourselves? That's
Yes.
great. That's such a good question, and it shows your own awareness to improve. Absolutely. I'm developing my ICC. Coming to Malaysia is a great chance for me to develop my own ICC. I would say the suggestions I give today are applicable to teachers themselves too. Like, first of all, I think it's so important for us to know our own cultural self, cultural identity. So when we train teachers, the first unit, I often begin with who are we culturally? So it's not just, oh, I'm Kashan Khong, I'm a US professor. But really, fundamentally, I feel I'm so complex because I grew up in China and then I received education in the UK and now I'm a US citizen. I'm also in an international marriage. I'm also a third child in my family. So much construct who you are. So I think the teachers need to know their boundaries, need to know their advantages and limitations. So that leads to your critical awareness. Your reflection is important. Secondly, same measurements, same domains, knowledge. Teachers should be always interested in knowing other cultures and other teaching pedagogies across the borders. They know about skills. Are they able to interpret students? Because especially if you have students from different ethnicities and countries, sometimes the way your students communicate with you, although you are all within Malaysia, students communicating with you sometimes could cause intercultural conflict or misunderstanding. As a teacher, how do you set up a role model to mediate such conflicts? That's also a learning opportunity for you. And also think about your own attitude. Are you yourself open to learn from other people? And if you have a chance, again, high impact learning often comes from study abroad or teaching abroad or visiting scholarship. So being in that community overseas will really foster your growth or speed up your growth. So absolutely, teachers constantly growing, I myself included. I use the IDI to assess myself. So if teachers, IDI that assessment is not that expensive. I think it's $20, something like that. If you can afford it, it will be interesting for you to assess yourself and see where do I stand. For instance, a teacher's IDI assessment stage sometimes reflects how this teacher teaches. If for example, if I'm minimization, I always feel that, students, Chinese students, African students, or European students, they are the same, minimization. So if I conceive my students like that, when I teach, I probably would not differentiate my teaching that well, because I think they are the same topic will work, the same approach will work. So I will remind myself to look at differences so I can differentiate my teaching and cater students better. So I think knowing yourself, knowing where you want to go, develop your skills, your knowledge, attitudes, always reflect, always help.
Thank you, Doctor. There is one more very interesting question here. How do we negotiate the nonverbal misinterpretation as one of the obstacles of intercultural communication, considering the ease of accessibility of content sharing on the internet?
Right, that's such a good question, and it looks at many nuances. You are combining internet, nonverbal, and across cultures. If possible, I would think begin with observations. So nonverbal communication, if you don't understand why they do it, I would be patient to observe how other people respond, especially people from the same community. I may observe how people respond to that. If you are possible, you can ask friends around you to fact check. Why do I do that? Or sometimes the nonverbal communication, the nonverbal gesture may be applicable for people within the community. If a foreigner does that, it may not send out the same message. So you want to be careful, but after you observe enough, you will make your informed decision to try. And if you try it and you can show a phrase we call is IH, intellectual humility. So intellectual humility means you recognize your knowledge limitations, but you're willing to try. And when you tell your target culture interlocutors or your people you communicate with and say, I observed this, I'm going to do that, and show your vulnerability, show your limitation, people are always mostly very willing to help you. But I think the difficult or the time when the cultural conflicts occur is that you don't understand and you don't want to know why. Then you still stick to your way and everyone sticks to their way. No one makes compromises. Then I think that's when the cultural conflicts occur.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. This is my personal question. How does today's borderless communication influence the complexity of ICC?
Such a good question. I think one complexity is defining community, because traditionally we define community by national borders. But now, like you mentioned, borderless education, we are in one community. So I think it's important for us to develop our complexity of understanding community. You can be in one community. When I finish this meeting, I can be community with my tailor's colleagues, or I can be a community with my US family. That adds to the complexity, but I think it's a good thing because of all this interconnectedness, right? So students understand I don't necessarily have to marry to one community. I'm fluid. When you become fluid, you are more open to meet people. You see we are connected one way or another. So when I want to do something good for the community, you are actually benefiting multiple. So I think that's one thing to affect the ICC. I also think it adds to the complexity of doing, because we say at the end of the day, we learn all this because we want to build a better community, practice our civic and social duties. But once you are connected with different communities online or borderless, sometimes how you define what is the best civic duty or activity or social duties will meet everyone's need. That needs negotiation. And that goes full circle to why negotiation is needed in IC. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Doctor, this topic has garnered so much interest, and there's one more question. Is there any taboo in teaching ICC in a curriculum such as the topic of religion?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the person who raised the question. You absolutely touch upon the sensitivity. And yes, and in the US context, teachers are not allowed to promote religion in public schools and many contexts. And also, religion is such a complex and personal beliefs is so deeply rooted that you can't really, it's not just one class, you throw out ICC framework, you convince people. It doesn't happen that way. I'm not ignorant. But when we talk about ICC, we're talking about your mindset, your worldview. No matter whether you use ICC to talk about religion, politics, gender, or whatever family issues, everything, it's more about the openness to hear what other people say. So you do not follow mainstream stereotypes, or you do not form your stereotypes. It's that you're willing to hear, and then again, you get to negotiate the meaning. It's not so much about I convince you or you convince me about religion. It's for me to understand more about the religion. So when I see people practice religion a certain way, I will not use the negative judgments. I'll say, oh, why? I'll be, oh, I know why. Although I don't do it this way, I know why. And I will be respectful. I'll be empathetic. So although the teachers in classroom may not talk about one religion or religion per se, the teachers will welcome students to talk about their religion and explain why. I think when people understand why, they will be less hostile. They'll be more understanding. The most difficult thing is ignorance and reject to understand. So not necessarily about the religion, because religion is a taboo, I understand. That's why if you go back to my slides, one slide shows the 10 tips about talking about sensitive topics, how we teachers as facilitators can create a safe environment and healthy discussion. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Doctor. I guess that's all for the questions. Okay, there is a request from our audience if they could have your slides.
Sure, I can send my slide to you and you can decide how you disseminate.
Okay, so our committee members will email the slides to all the participants. Make sure that they fill in the participation form through the link that will be shared later.
Okay.
Okay, I wish to thank all the audiences for attending today's program, and especially to Dr. Kashan Khong for sharing your wisdom, which has inspired all of us to be more appreciative of cultural diversity. And yeah. Okay, please wait because the link to the attendance will be shared. Okay, Doctor. As a token of appreciation from us, UiTM Cawangan Kelantan, I hereby present the certificate of appreciation, and please kindly accept our utmost gratitude for cooperating with us in organizing this program.
It's my honor, and thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Perhaps you have some final words for our audience today.
I would just say, first of all, I want to express my immense gratitude for this opportunity. And I understand that your office has invited educators from different countries. And it means a lot to me to be able to have this opportunity to share what I'm passionate about. And I welcome your suggestions and I welcome opportunities to discuss further. And again, intercultural competence, the fact that you are willing to join my lecture shows your willingness to develop your own intercultural competence. And it's a long journey, but I don't feel alone. I feel like I'm with you. As an African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go farther, go together. So I feel like we're going together.
That's a wise proverb. Okay, thank you again, Doctor. And I wish that we'll have another opportunity to invite you again for another series of lecture on intercultural communication in collaboration with UiTM Cawangan Kelantan under the Office of International Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you so much and goodbye, everyone.
And see you again. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you to everyone. Please sign your attendance here through the link that has been shared in YouTube. Bye.